Hello and welcome to Selling Sheet Music, a podcast created to help composers, arrangers, and songwriters learn the ins and outs of self-publishing sheet music. I'm your host, Garrett Breeze, and today I'm talking to Jacob Tingen. We first met as undergrad students in the trombone studio at Brigham Young University. Now he's a lawyer, a business consultant, and the designer and webmaster I use for all my sites. We talk about the basics of how to set up and maintain a website, how to get your content to rank highly on Google search, how to effectively market yourself through social media, and much more. ArrangeMe.com gives you free access to over 4 million copyrighted titles, allowing you to easily and legally publish your arrangements. And your works will be distributed by the world's most popular sheet music retailers. ArrangeMe users have already earned over $5 million in commissions. Join the world's largest self-publishing community at ArrangeMe.com today. All right, today on the podcast we have Jacob Tingen. He's an old friend of mine, and he is actually the one who built, so far you built me 3 websites. GarrettBreeze.com, BreezeTunes.com, HolidayChoirMusic.com. Would you just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm like that dog in the movie Up that's all like squirrel, and so I consider myself an entrepreneur first and a lawyer second. And so I own my own law firm. Graduating from BYU, I wanted to keep taking private lessons. So I actually approached Will Kimball and said, hey, I'll make you a website if you keep giving me lessons for a little bit, because I also was poor still. And he said, sure. And then I'm also like, okay, now I got to figure out how to make a website. So his was my first website, and it's still up. You can check it out at kimballtrombone.com.
And it's blown up, hasn't it?
Yeah, it gets like 5,000 visits a month, which for a trombone website is probably like everybody in the world who plays trombone. So,
That's probably not far off.
And so that's been a cool project. And then I went to law school. I always knew I would work for myself, but I didn't think it would happen so fast. So I graduated and could not find work. It was the 2012 economy for lawyers, very difficult. And so I ended up just kind of hustling. And so I did some websites, I did some law. The law has grown faster than the web. What I really enjoy is business law, branding, intellectual property.
The reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is because so many musicians have questions about building a website, starting a website. But if you have the website and you don't know how to present yourself, you don't know how to market yourself, it doesn't really do you any good. And you're someone who's able to speak to both of those things. So I guess to kind of start off, is it even necessary for a musician to have a website? Is it enough to just have, Facebook and Instagram and all these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. So it's important to figure out your goals. So let's say you're already a successful musician and you just want to have a place for people to easily find you and professionally present your information. You just need a website with a good photo and accurate information, what I tend to call like a business card website. You'll see these pop up for like properties. Realtors will just put up like a website for a home, and people can do that as well. And you might think, like you just said, well, what's the point if you've got a LinkedIn and you've got all this other stuff? Having your own website does give you a lot more control in how it's presented and how the information is presented. I think everybody should own their own domain name. Then you can put your digital home there. And then from there, you can link to all your social profiles. If all you want is just kind of like an online business card, then you don't need to be spending $10,000 on a website. That's okay. For a lot of people, that's the need they're filling. But then there are people like my good friend, Garrett Breeze, who wants to put massive amounts of audio and sheet music online. And at that point, it's a completely different ballgame. It's a completely different strategy. And so we're talking, okay, content marketing, social media, how can people find me? And then I also need something dynamic that lets people search my music, listen to it, download it, buy it. We're doing a lot there. And so that's the strategies are completely different.
Okay, well, before we get into the strategy, let's do kind of the basic technical stuff. So if I'm a composer and I want to do it myself and make my own website, what are the options?
So I know a couple of SEO guys, and they will tell you Wix is always bad, and Shopify is always bad because you're still giving your web presence to somebody else. And I get that and I feel that, but I think that as a practical like return on investment matter for a lot of people, Wix is going to be fine, right? Like if you're just doing a business card website, that's fine. But if that's the direction you're headed, I would do WordPress.com. I develop solely on WordPress for marketing websites. I think it's the way to go. I think WordPress, the last time I checked, and every time I check, the percentage grows, powers like 35% of the internet. So 1 out of 3 sites you're visiting is probably on WordPress. And so if you go on a WordPress.com and then maybe your site grows and then you do want to transition to your own site, you can bring that export file with you, and that's a lot easier to do. It's impossible to not find a WordPress developer. So I think WordPress, just brand-wise, is the direction I'd go. But that's where you'd get started, right? So you'd buy a domain. I would not buy the domain through WordPress. Buy the domain through somebody like GoDaddy or Google Domains, and then connect it to your WordPress.com website, and then take it from there. The same goes for like Wix and these other site builders. Don't buy a domain through them either, because that's a terrible disaster.
Can you talk about the domain thing a little more? Like, how do you pick a domain? How do you buy it? And like, why would you not go through Wix or WordPress directly?
Let's pull that apart into 2 different questions. So first there's, what name to get? What are you going to call your business? I'd just call it after yourself or similar enough to yourself. Like I like yours, Breeze Tunes, right? It's got your name, got what you do, Breeze Tunes, simple. It's great. It's very smart, right? And then you also have GarrettBreeze.com.
And you made me buy that one too, because you were like, you got to start building a brand. It's got to be off of you. You're the product. You went through this whole spiel.
Yeah. When I first started my law firm, I called it Good with Laws. And my tagline was great with people. So Good with Laws, great with people is the name of my firm. I go into court and this judge looks at this filing and goes, Good with Laws? And I'm like, yes, Your Honor. He goes, you got to change your name, counsel. I was like, okay, Your Honor. So Tingen Law it is. All right. And I do own jacobtingen.com. But yeah, I mean, your name is your word is your bond, right? I mean, that's where you build who you are. You probably already have goodwill with your friends and family, so your brand has begun. Yeah, I would start by definitely registering your own name in some form or another. So the problem that I have with buying your domain name through somebody like WordPress or Wix or something like that is that those sites were designed to create websites, not to register domains initially. And so you're not going to find an interface that is easily editable or usable as you might on GoDaddy or Google Domains, which were designed for domain management. And if you're going to have somebody else get involved, which if this is not what you do, someday you may have somebody else involved helping you move your website around or do things. You want your domain in a place that's easily accessible and easy to work with. GoDaddy, Google Domains, those are, I'm sure there are others, but you want to go to a domain registrar, because I've worked with clients who registered their domain through, I think it was Wix, I don't know, but it was like I had to ask to get it transferred. I mean, you have to make a support request to do things that otherwise, if it's like with Google Domains, you can just log in and take care of. And so that is why you want to use a domain registrar that's reputable.
Are there other sort of best practices to keep in mind if you're gonna go it alone and you don't really understand web design, but maybe you've watched some YouTube tutorials? Talk to me like I'm 5. What do I need to be thinking about?
When you start to go down the rabbit hole of WordPress and you realize, holy cow, I've got a WordPress website. I can install any plugin in the world and accomplish anything online, right? I don't need a developer. I'm so smart. I've got this figured out. What you don't realize is that each time you install or activate a new plugin on your website, that's more code that's running and you've slowed things down. So that's the first thing that I would say is, sure, you might have a very functional site that can do all this cool stuff, but then you may end up with a very slow site that never ranks on Google, because Google's going to say, you know what, I'm never going to load your site because it takes 5 seconds per page. And most people click away and lose patience after like the first 10 milliseconds, right? So, instead they're going to click on Garrett Breeze's site because the server is lightning fast, right? That's something you need to pay attention to. The other thing I would say is you can find cheap hosting, but you do get what you pay for. And you can find WordPress hosts like $3.95 a month or whatever. What you don't know, what they don't tell you at the beginning, is that this tends to be shared hosting. So it's you and 100 other people sharing the same like computer. So if somebody else's website is hogging a lot of resources, let's say they installed 80 WordPress plugins on their site. And now it's slowing down your site because your neighbor is using 80 WordPress plugins. That's obviously something you don't want. So it's probably worth it to find, and this is the keyword to Google, managed WordPress hosting, and pay the 10, 15, 20, 30 bucks it costs to maintain good hosting. Again, if it's a business card website and you're like on something like WordPress.com and you tie a unique domain to that, you're probably fine. But once you get off on your own site, you should pay for a virtual private server with managed WordPress hosting. And most modern managed hosting services will do things that you want, like connect an SSL certificate, make your website secure. That's required if you're going to be collecting client or user information or going to be doing transactions on your website.
I think most people listening are going to be interested in some kind of a storefront or e-commerce platform. Is that something that comes with the WordPress blogs and the do-it-yourself options, or do you need to have someone build it for you if you're going to be selling products?
I don't want to miss anything. So we were just talking about the SSLs. So I want to be technically correct and let you know that if you're selling your material elsewhere, you may not need the SSL certificates, like the thing that puts the lock in the browser URL bar. But it's now a ranking factor for Google to rank you. And so again, any reputable managed hosting service is going to provide an easy, probably free way to install an SSL certificate. So make sure you do that, whether you sell stuff or not. If you link somewhere else, maybe that's all you need. Maybe it's just as easy as a link from your site to this other platform that sells the music for you. If you're going to build like an in-house platform like breezetunes.com, you want to install a plugin if you're building on WordPress. And frankly, I think that's probably that's what I know best. And so that's the context that I'm going to talk about this angle from. I think you could reasonably or credibly do something similar on Shopify. Again, if you're going to build something, though, I wouldn't build on Shopify because the store essentially belongs to them. Getting that out somewhere else is going to be difficult. I think if you're ready to do that, you should probably own it yourself on your own managed hosting service via WordPress. The most popular WordPress e-commerce plugin is WooCommerce. I think easy digital downloads is also a very viable option for those of you who aren't shipping any physical products. But because WooCommerce kind of won the WordPress e-commerce war, it has more resources, more developers who know about the product. It might be the easiest way to go, despite frankly being more complex than easy digital downloads. So it's a whole other conversation that probably isn't necessary for this podcast.
All right, well, let's ask this then. At what point do you think somebody needs to have a website built for them versus doing it themselves?
Let's say you've got that business card website and you're hustling elsewhere. You're doing things on social media, you're attending conferences, you're selling on some of these other sites, and people are telling you, man, I really wish that I was looking for this sheet music, but I couldn't find it on this other site. Where is that? And you start to think, well, geez, maybe I should have that on my own site. There's a chance that you could reasonably, if you're only going to sell like 4 or 5 products, maybe you do that yourself. But if you're going to start like really pushing and growing your online presence through your own website, that's the point where I would say, okay, am I going to do this as my job and now spend 10 to 20 hours a week every week doing this part of my business for myself or not? And then maybe at that point, I'll hire somebody else to do it for me.
I think that's a good way of thinking about it, thinking about the time you would spend doing it yourself.
You know, I don't want to imply that you have to spend 20 hours a week to maintain a website. Like a lot of it is once it's set up, you can set it and forget it. So for example, on BreezeTunes, you write music and then you put it on your website, correct?
Yeah, so I didn't do anything really with the setup, but then it's organized in a way that I can go add products by myself. I can update a page or add new text or whatever by myself. So I don't think you have much day-to-day involvement with the website, but setting it up was a lot of work. And then of course, when anything breaks and you get a frantic email from me saying, that everything's down and we're getting hacked from North Korea, or whatever it is, that's when it's really good to have a web designer in your corner.
And so how many hours a week do you spend like uploading a new product?
I mean, I would say it probably takes a half hour to an hour to upload a new product. I mean, and that's with variations because I'll write something that has multiple voicings. And so, coming up with the product description and uploading the audio and linking it to all the social medias and, the cover pages and the images and everything is there. I mean, it probably takes about a half hour.
I mean, that's pretty good, right? I mean, that's a pretty good, at this point, return on your investment.
Yeah, and you had to definitely hold my hand in the beginning and kind of walk me through, but
yeah, I think we walked through a couple. But
you've obviously worked on a lot of musician websites. So how do you think they ought to be organized?
Yeah, I mean, we all miss MySpace, right? That's where musicians used to go.
It's coming back. It's coming back.
When you have a WordPress website, you have essentially two kinds of content that you can create: pages and posts. And then if you install something like WooCommerce for e-commerce, you have a third kind of content that you can create, which is products. And so I would only create the number of pages necessary to introduce what I do, right? So a home page, an about page, a contact page, probably all you really need for most musicians, and then maybe some kind of services page. So we're talking home, about, contact, services, not necessarily in that order. So 4 pages. And then the rest should be blog posts. And the reason for that is that, to make a well-designed web page can be time consuming because as any good creative musician knows, right? So like, should that be an F sharp or should this be a minor 6 or should it be a 3 chord? You can like battle in your brain for like 2 hours over a small decision like that. And it's the same with web design. You can be like, should it be 12 pixels or 10? And you've wasted an hour and a whole day. And so you design your web pages, and then for the rest of your content, you just want to do blog posts. They look the same every time. You're just writing. And the reason you want to have a lot of blog posts, or if you're doing products, is you want to have a lot of products, is Google will index that. The search engines index your content. They organize it in their giant, massive database. And when people are searching for Baroque trombone music and you've got a blog post about it, by golly, they're going to land on your page, your blog post page about Baroque trombone music. And then they're going to see your services tab and say, hey, this is really well written. Look at the stuff that he does. Oh, he even sells this sheet music. I think I'm going to buy some. And that's how online sales and search marketing kind of work in its most basic sense.
Tingen Law provides immigration, business, and intellectual property services. They can provide assistance with federal trademark and copyright issues in all 50 states and business legal services in Utah and Virginia. Additionally, as an extension of its business and IP practice, Tingen Law provides business consulting and online branding services to help businesses succeed online. Visit tingen.law to learn more. Well, let's dig into that a little deeper because I think SEO or search engine optimization is probably one of the things our listeners have the most questions about.
All right. So let me ask you a question. What's something you have Googled recently, Garrett?
Paddle boards.
Paddle boards. Why were you Googling for paddle boards?
To buy one for my wife.
Okay. So your wife wants a paddle board, or you think she does?
Well, we bought it. Not spoiling anything here if she's listening.
Right. Okay. So I'm Googling paddle boards right now. I see some ads, and then my organic results are Costco, REI. Then there's Switchback Travel. All I Googled was paddleboard, period, right? Then I see some map results. I see REI, which is to be expected. They're a big corporate one. Dick's Sporting Goods also. But then I see West Marine, and I can tell from the pictures, it looks more like a mom and pop store, right? Now, the reason that they pop up on search results in maps and other places is because they've done a couple of things here, okay? One, they have written content about paddleboards, okay? That's step number one, okay? So I'm Google. I want to show relevant search results. If you've got a website about cats and I search paddleboard and you've got one blog post from 20 years ago about how it was so cute this one time you took a picture of a cat on a paddleboard, and that's the search result I give you as Google, how happy are you as a searcher? Not very happy at all, right? Okay, so Google then looks at the whole website and they're like, well, this website is about cats. It's not about paddleboards. I'm going to set it to the side. And then it looks at the next one. All right, now let's apply that to your music. So you want people to buy choir music for their high school show choirs, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So Google's going to look at all the websites out there that it's already looked at about this topic. And if it finds a site about cats, and this woman is all like, I went to my granddaughter's show choir rehearsal thing, Google's going to say, all right, never mind. But then it looks at garrettbreeze.com and it finds a blog post about how to arrange for show choir. And then it finds a couple of other posts about show choir performances, or I think you also judge, right? And I think you've written about that. So it finds 3 posts and it starts going ding, ding, ding. I think I found something. And then it finds some links from garrettbreeze.com to breezetunes.com, and it finds an entire catalog of, I think you have like 500 songs up there now.
Oh, we're over 1,000.
Okay, we're over 1,000, baby, right? So you got 1,000 songs. Google look at that and say, well, this is show choir. So if somebody Googles show choir, this is what the result that I need to give, right? And so that's how Google works. It wants to present useful information. And so if you sell show choir music, but you have 1 page of show choir music compared to Breeze Tunes' 1,000, what are your chances of ranking? 0, right? And so you have to provide useful content for Google to rank you. And then the other thing that I would say is something that has been occurring to me more and more and more is Google has come out with this, they want to find authoritative sources too. And so they've been doing I think it's EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And so you want to build trust through your site for Google to send people to your site. And so that is really the foundation of modern search, is you want to become an authority in your product and your topic. Now, are you ever going to compete with big players? Probably not. You're one person, even though you're a company, and you should look at yourself that way. Are you ever going to compete with, if you're West Marine, are you going to compete with REI for paddleboards? Probably not. But if you have like a specific,
but they got on there,
they got on there, right? But if you have a unique selling proposition, something that makes you extra special, well, then by golly, you're going to pop. And I'm just curious now, actually. You can ask me a question, but I'm going to Google show choir Garrett Breeze.
Well, I do think every composer, every musician should Google themselves and see what comes up. I think that's really instructive in a lot of ways.
If you Google show choir music for high school, there's a bunch of ads, but you are the 4th organic search result. It goes J.W. Pepper. Okay, actually the 3rd. J.W. Pepper, showchoir.com, and Breeze Tunes.
All right, I'll take it. Is it the amount of content, or is it the regularity of it? Is the length of it? Like, how do those different factors rank in terms of how Google sees it?
There is a ton of information written about how Google ranks content and keywords and metadata and all of this stuff. The thing to remember is it's kind of like music theory, okay? Bear with me for a second. So we look back at Mozart and Beethoven and we say, oh, this is what they were doing. And that's how we view the music, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that some of these older musicians were thinking, well, I'm going to go from a major 4, major 5, 1. I mean, I think Mozart probably did by the time he rolled around, right? But I think some of these earliest musicians maybe didn't analyze their music in the way we analyze their music. I think music analysis is helpful. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand me. But I think that a lot of times people are just being creative, right? And then we come back and we analyze and we say, well, why did that work? That's what Google is doing. That's what SEOs are doing when they're saying, oh, well, look, it had this keyword so many times. If you study music analysis too much, your music can appear choppy, right? There's got to be room for creativity still. And so that's my approach to content creation for the web is I could tell you, oh, and there are SEO plugins you should absolutely install to help you write content that has enough keywords, is likely to rank. I'm not saying ignore them, but at the end of the day, you just want to be a trustworthy source. Like, you shouldn't focus on gaming the system. You should focus on being the best show choir website in the world, right? Or if maybe you sell, maybe you're Lindsey Sterling and you want to do dance and violin, right? So for her, and she was brilliant at this. She just made cool stuff, right? People just love cool stuff. Think about anybody who's truly succeeded online. They just have made cool stuff. And that's the thing to realize about social media as well. I actually have recently decided that social media marketing is a bit of a misnomer. You have to approach social media like it's a separate product. People want to be educated, entertained, or inspired. And so you want to approach social media from the same aspect. And once you get into the business of creating cool stuff, people will follow you because they want to be educated, entertained, or inspired. People do not want to be sold. Like, nobody's going to follow you, Garrett, if you get onto Twitter and say, buy my show choir music. Like, who cares, right? But if you post, guys, check out this freaking sweet arrangement I just did. Here's the MIDI file. And people listen to it. And they're like, that is really cool. They're a lot more likely to buy than if you posted the other lame tweet. So yes, from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of SEO specific things you can do. But if we spent 30 minutes talking about that, I think you'd get less out of this conversation than what I just said.
HolidayChoirMusic.com is your one-stop shop for unique and exciting choral arrangements for Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter, and other holidays. Check out our new releases for 2022, or give your choir the gift of new music this holiday season by commissioning a new work. Enter the code PODCAST at checkout to get 50% off your first order. You sent me a bunch of material when we were putting the website together to read about SEO and blogging and branding yourself and all of that stuff. And I remember it being really frustrating because a lot of the advice out there didn't really apply to what I was doing, because a lot of the guides that are written out for, out there for SEO are about, you're selling a t-shirt, and the assumption is that basically anyone in the world is a potential customer. But, when you're a musician, that's not necessarily true. Like, if you're writing music for oboe, your customer base is pretty much only people that play oboe, and the relatives of people who only play the oboe that might buy it for them as a present. You know what I mean? So you're looking for a much more specific group of people. And so is there a way you approach SEO or marketing just in general differently because of that?
So they always say the riches are in the niches, right? So you do want to find a niche, like show choir specifically, not just composing music generally, right? I would say music composition is probably too broad. Show choir arrangements is probably just specific enough, right? Show choir arrangements for high school show choirs, very specific, right? And that's where the riches are in the niches. So you've got this niche and you're doing a great job there. So how do you create content for that niche? Again, I think that it comes down to saying, okay, this is a niche. I'm going to become an authority on it. I'm specialized in this. How do you specialize in it? I mean, I think that you're a good example for anybody listening. Just visit Breeze Tunes. Check out how the number of arrangements there and the writing about the arrangement.
Do a product and a post have equal weight when it comes to the search engines?
A product or a post?
Yeah, because I have a lot of products on Breeze Tunes, but I don't have a ton of written content. And, I don't have a lot of blog content there.
So this is exactly what I was going to say. We'll talk about a couple of things, and we'll talk about products versus posts. So let's say I know that I can't beat JW Pepper and I can't beat showchoir.com, but maybe there's a chance I could beat breezetunes.com.
Go for it.
I apologize.
Bring it on.
So I go to your website and I look at your arrangements page and I picked an arrangement. So I've got Let's Start Tomorrow Night, original artist, smash, performance time, 4 minutes, 11 seconds, instrumentation, says the instruments, voicing, and then you've got a file to listen to this arrangement. Sounds pretty good. All right. So what's not here is a full written description of what it is. Completely missing, right? And so if I wanted to compete with you, then I would make an arrangement for this song or similar songs. It doesn't have to be this song, but I would add a 500-word description to every single one of my products. And then what happens is you start to lose visits to your site, and you find out what your competitor's doing, and then you start writing 1,000-word descriptions of your pieces. And then eventually, is somebody else going to write 2,000-word descriptions? I mean, at some point you start to lose return on investment. But yeah, I mean, that matters. the difference between a product and a post, Google probably doesn't put too much stock into that. I think it is going to recognize that this is a store product as opposed to a blog post article. And then there are things you can do to boost that with what's called schema. And this is a very technical SEO thing. And there are plugins that do some of these functions automatically. Schema tells Google like what I'm looking at. Like if it's a recipe, you can put like a tag around the heading, like recipe description, recipe ingredients. And you can let Google and give them a heads up like, hey, this is what we're talking about here. And then it can categorize that better and give search results. That's definitely something you can do with blog posts versus blog products and maybe rank differently in different ways. But for the vast majority of people in this industry in your niche, you're ranking third because nobody's competing with you.
But you've also kind of illustrated my point, because the internet would go and tell you to write a 500-word essay for each of your products. But I don't know a single music publisher out there who is writing anywhere close to that length of content. And I don't know any conductor or teacher who wants to sit there and read 500 words for each product they're potentially buying, because all they want to do is listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument, and actually an article I read recently that says Google has ruined the internet. And here's one example, like recipes. I hate it when I go to a recipe site and the first thing I'm bombarded with is a story about how they couldn't find the perfect.
You have to read their life story first.
You have to read their life story before you get a stupid recipe. I hate that. Hate it with a passion. The people who are smart, and Google has actually figured this out. They're starting to rank the people who put a link at the top of the page to the recipe. You can just jump to the recipe.
Okay, but why not just put the recipe first and then have all the words after it? That way Google still sees.
That's how I would do it. That's how I would do it.
Okay.
The reason people don't is because it increases their bounce rate. This is where SEO causes a problem, right? And then Google eventually comes back and fixes it, because then they downrank all the sites that suck because they were gaming the system. So you're right. Do they want a 500-word description? Maybe not.
So what I hear you saying is, don't stress out about what the SEO gurus say you have to do, and look at who else is competing in your niche and, make sure that you're one-upping them, essentially.
I would agree with that. Look at your niche, see what's being done, and make sure you one-up your niche. The problem is once you start to do that, eventually somebody will come along, see what you're doing in your niche, and one-up you. So you have to keep track of your analytics data. Google Analytics is free. It's easy to install on WordPress or virtually any platform, and you should keep track. Now, let me add one thing to that about content creation. Google, they look at a number of factors, and they're absolutely going to look at factors in your niche. And I assume that every niche is a little bit different, but the variety of content is going to matter. I want to give a good example. Let's say you have a blog post, and I don't know why cats keep coming to mind, but let's say you have a blog post about cats, right? It's 500 words. Let's say your neighbor has a blog post about cats that's also 500 words, and they're substantially similar. But on your neighbor's page, they have a video of them talking about cats. They have 4 images. You have 0 images. And then they also have, like I mentioned, the schema code to like outline like a testimonial from somebody about how great you are with cats, and a couple of other like additional features on their page. Which one is Google going to give them? The page with the video or the page without the video? The page with the images or the page without the images, right? Google's going to say, well, this website has more on it. I'll probably rank them first. And so maybe you don't add a verbal description, but maybe you start recording a quick YouTube video where you say, hey guys, the inspiration for this piece was, I was listening to this. I feel like this is a great piece for middle school choirs or younger choirs, or this is a great piece for more advanced choirs. I don't know how long it would take you to make a 5-minute video for each of your pieces. As you said, it takes you 30 minutes. If it now takes you 35, but cements your position or even gets you above JW Pepper, is that worth it? I don't know, but maybe it is. That's a decision for you to make. One other thing you said is SEOs don't follow SEO advice. But what I would say is good SEOs, really good SEOs today are going to tell you something similar to what I said, which is just write naturally, create good content. In fact, that's been the same message forever. And then all these other like granular detail things are efforts to game the system, they're music theory analysis. They're not actual writing music. And so you just want to make good music. You just want to make good content. You just actually want to make the world a better place instead of doing recipes and putting them after 1,000 words life story. Just put the recipe at the top, right? Like that's how the internet always should have been. That's the lesson.
Do these same concepts also apply to social media?
Yeah, so I used to give this advice that I've seen everywhere, which is 50, 30, 20, which is like 50% of the time share your own content that's really cool, 20% of the time, or 30% of the time share other people's content that's really cool in your niche, and then 20% of the time sell yourself. I no longer agree with that. I just think the entire point is educate, entertain, inspire, focus on becoming an expert, focus on being authoritative, focus on being trustworthy. If you do those things through your content, you will succeed.
My understanding is that the more things you have linking back to your website, whether it be a product or a video, my understanding is that those are really important for Google search. And so composers in particular, if you're selling sheet music, you have a lot of opportunity to create link backs to your site through products. So like if I write one piece and I put a video on YouTube, and then I also post it on Instagram, and then I also have it published on JW Pepper, and all of those things have a link to my website, isn't that going to be a big boost for the website?
I'm going to say yes, tentatively, but I also want to give you a little bit of history on backlinks. Once everybody found out that Google gave sites more authority from backlinks, they view it as an authority signal. Like, oh, look, other sites also trust this website. It must be a good site. This must be a good page. And then people started putting backlinks to their site and comments on other people's blogs. And then people would do, so they call it black hat SEO. That's a very common black hat SEO tactic, is to just send out a robot to make 1 million comments on other people's blogs with a link back to your page. And then all of a sudden, Google would, in theory, be like, oh, wait, look at how fancy and useful this site is, right? There are 1 million people linking back to it. Well, Google wisened up to that very quickly. The same thing happened with like guest posts. Guest posting was all the rage because people are like, oh, it's a more natural way to get a link back to your site. You post a blog post to somebody else's blog, and then you put a link back to your site. And then both of you profit because your neighbor gets content and you get a link. And, then they'll guest post on your site and vice versa, right? But then Google saw that people were doing that too much in an unnatural way, and started penalizing sites for that. So I'm not saying that guest posts are bad ideas. I think guest posts are great ideas, but within your niche, it still has to make sense. Like, you're not going to come to my law firm website and guest post about music, and I'm not going to come to Breeze Tunes and guest post about law, because Google's going to look at that and be like, what are these people doing? And they're going to penalize us, right? So,
and when you say Google, this is like the algorithm, right? Or are there people actually checking this?
I don't know. I mean, there are people who are more on top of this than I am. I think there are occasionally like manual corrections, but I think generally the algorithm does it, or they'll even do updates to the algorithm. And like Panda and others, they have these fun names. Panda was really tough on some of these backlink practices. I think that one was like several years old though. And then during the pandemic, there were a couple of course corrections to the algorithm to kind of beat out some of this spam behavior. So when it comes though to like publishing music, that's what social media is for. Of course, you want to share your music. You say, hey, check out my new song. I've posted it here. Check out my new video. Or, hey, here's a new video I posted about my new song at my website. Sure, link around.
Well, that's related to your content. That's related to your content.
Right. What you want to avoid is that whole question about putting the recipe after the 1,000-word life story. You've made the world a worse place by doing that. So ask yourself, if you're doing something, am I making the world a better place? If the answer is yes, you probably won't get penalized by Google. If you've made the world a worse place, Google, if they're not penalizing you under the current algorithm, they will under the next, right? Because they catch on to these ways that people play with the system, and they do course corrections, and sites that used to rank really high suddenly plummet to the earth. And this happens all the time.
Shifting gears a little bit, how do you balance the social media marketing versus the traditional web marketing?
Personally, for me, I'm moving away from the term social media marketing. I want to start viewing social media as its own like product or service line. I wouldn't say that the old stuff is dead. It's very much alive. Content is king. I would just say that what qualifies content is evolving. It's really amazing how you can repurpose content. So this video could end up on YouTube. You could have a podcast. You could have a transcript. You could take some of that content and make quote blocks that you put on Instagram. You can share this on TikTok too, right? Like, right. So you take one piece of content. This is an hour, and you're going to make 8 pieces of content from it and share it all over the web. That's absolutely what you should do, and it's easier to do than it's ever been. Like, you could have a transcript of this thing made up in a matter of minutes and have that instantly shareable, and you should post it as a blog post alongside the video on your website, and it's a great way to make lots of content.
Is there a ranking or a priority? Does video score higher than text, or is it about how many people interact with the content?
So not all SEOs agree on all things. And to clarify, I don't consider myself an SEO so much as just somebody who's been in this space for a while. And there are different schools of thought, right? Like, there are people that have different perspectives on a lot of different things. But some people might tell you, you want to create every single kind of content. You want to create written content, video content, podcasting content, infographics, all of it, right? But then I think within your niche, it matters. And also what you're trying to do. Take, like, I don't know, Mark Rober. I love his YouTube videos, right? Engineering guy, NASA engineer. Now he just posted videos of his really cool secret lab, right? Which is really awesome. Or the scammer video that he did, or, he's the guy with the glitter bombs, right? I don't think he has a blog. At least I've never looked for it. Why would I? So if you're Mark Rober, is really the best use of his time to make a blog? I don't think so. So it depends on your niche. It depends on your audience. If you're competing with other people and they're making video and you're not, I think you need to be careful. But as to where you spend your time, I think it depends on your audience and what you're doing.
Do you have any, closing remarks or advice you maybe want to give to wrap things up?
I think it's important to remember return on investment. It can be easy to sink tons of time down the web rabbit hole. Which is also why I think it's important to just make cool stuff, make the world a better place, and you will be rewarded. The internet is like the embodiment of karma, right? Like, you put good stuff out, good stuff will come to you. But yeah, I think it's really great to be involved in the creative field and to maybe give some advice to help people kind of dominate in their space. I didn't realize you were ranking that high for high school show choir music. I'm actually really proud of that. So. And proud of you for doing it. Well, all I did was say, you're the one that's made all the content. So,
are there any resources you'd recommend, with SEO and web design and content marketing and all those sorts of things? We didn't even talk about building an audience. That's one of your soapboxes that you've shared with me time and time again.
Yeah, if you have 1 million followers, you could sell rubber bands and make a living, right? So it doesn't matter what you sell if you have a following. For me, places to find authoritative information. Google itself will publish their webmaster guidelines, I think, on an annual basis, if not more frequently. QuickSprout is an excellent website. If you Google QuickSprout Online MBA and read those, I think it's like 12 PDF ebook things, you will be as much of an expert, if not more, than I currently am on this topic. Moz.com, Moz SEO, also has resources and material on SEO generally. And after those 3 resources, I've probably given you more than you will ever be able to read in your lifetime. So there you have it.
Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, Garrett, it's been fun. I'm happy that your site is doing well, and I'm glad we can help with that.
Selling Sheet Music is written and produced by Garrett Breeze. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review on your platform of choice. You can find transcripts of each episode at garrettbreeze.com. Our theme music is written by Garrett Breeze and David Dykstra.